Aloha, Ahta. How's it going?
Great. Hi, Josh. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to get into protein today. Protein's a big part of what we're doing at Sarva. And, it's got a lot of conversation, excitement, and hype. So maybe we could start with you talking about, what's the big deal with protein? What is it, and why is it good for us?
Yeah. Well, over my lifespan, I would say it's the one like nutritional thing that the most people know about. Like if you were to do a poll and like an incredibly high percentage, even kids know about protein, but they don't know, about micronutrients. They certainly don't know about, fiber or whatever, healthy fats. So protein is well known. Well, why? And is it worth all this hype? Well, kind of, yeah, it is because, um, yeah, it's the building blocks of life. But there's the first thing we want to get into. We've kind of got these 9 points in mind, I think, here.
Mhm.
And that's protein. What is it really? Right. And um, and in one way, it's just a word that scientists came up with for a collection of amino acids, a string of amino acids, right? And so in the geeky science world, the word proteins is referred to all kinds of amino acid combinations, right? But us humans, when we talk protein, we're talking the 9 essential amino acids our bodies don't create from within. There's
Mhm.
another handful of amino acids that our bodies do create. So, so in one way, we could chuck the word protein for a minute, just just to like set it aside and go, well, wait. So what's the deal with amino acids? Like, first off, it doesn't sound good. Acids, you know, but amino acids are so cool because they're the building blocks of all life. And in the human body, they're the second largest quantity of molecules after what? Guess what's number one?
Water.
Yes, of course you would know. Anyway.
Good. Glad I got that right.
So, yeah. Anyway, so and I think the other thing we should get into is complete protein. So, one of the things that people have talked about forever in the nutrition circles, dietary science, is incomplete protein versus complete protein. Well, what's that all about? Like,
Mhm.
certainly when I was young, I was completely unaware that a lot of the advertising from the meat and dairy industry was putting down plant proteins as inferior because they're incomplete protein. And while on one level that is true, right? I mean,
Mhm.
animal based proteins do have a higher concentration of proteins in general by weight, higher concentrations of all 9 amino acids.
Mhm.
However, there's some downsides that we'll get into later. But then the whole issue came up of, well, if plant proteins are incomplete, what we do? Oh no. And there was sort of a bit of a kind of reactionary panic, and people kind of overdid it and said, well, like, you just can't get any protein from anything but meat. And of course, that was a misnomer. That was kind of a surface understanding that didn't understand that, all vegetables, all seeds, all nuts, all grains are loaded with amino acids,
Mhm.
especially seeds and nuts, right? And legumes. They're
Mhm.
all loaded with aminos. And if we eat a balanced diet, they tend to combine. So do you remember um, ever hearing about how, okay, well, in the Americas, the without having any science, any test tubes to reduce these things to their elements, they would just discover that corn and beans were a great combination.
Mhm.
Why?
Mhm.
They complemented each other. They're both a somewhat incomplete protein, meaning they each are missing one amino acid, right?
Mhm.
And when eaten together, or actually just in the same day, the body says, great, we're good. That's complete. So how does it really work? So think of your body. There's blood going through your veins and your arteries, and these arteries are delivering all these nutrients. They're just our blood is full of nutrients, and the cells are looking at them going by, the blood going by, saying, I'll take a little of that amino acid. I'll take a little of that amino acid. I'll take some of that vitamin. I'll take some of that mineral. Thank you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat corn and beans in the same day, you're good. Well, in Asia, it's more like lentils and rice, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, pick your culture. In the Middle East, it was garbanzo beans and sesame seeds to make hummus. Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, do you
Yeah,
have
we
any?
kind of intuitively knew.
Yeah,
Body just guides, hey, we've got these 9 essential amino acids that we um, aren't capable of metabolizing ourselves from our own body, and thus we
yeah,
need to be receiving them through our diet.
right. So that was our first point, was just to like really make it clear. Amino acids is what your body wants. So
Hmm.
protein's just a word. It's just a word that means a collection of amino acids, right? But what our body is absorbing right now, the reason I'm able to speak right now is amino acids, right? So, point number two, uh, quantity of protein. This is a big question,
Hmm.
kind of controversial,
Yeah, how
you
much do
know.
we eat? How much
Yeah,
do we
what
need?
what how's your evolution been around protein, over the years? Because mine's changed, so I'm curious what has evolved for you.
It's the same for me. My understanding and appreciation for protein has evolved a lot over the last 10 or 15 years in particular, and it continues to, even in the last year. And I would say I have over the years oscillated from being entirely animal-based protein into being entirely plant-based protein. And now I find that my body and my symptoms actually do best switching and just kind of moving from a majority animal to majority plant. And it's based on seasons, it's based on all sorts of things, stress levels, levels of exercise, the peace in my heart, you name it. It seems to be connected to how well I digest and assimilate the protein and what sources it's coming from. What about you?
Wow. Well, yeah. So, yeah, that's a great answer. I was thinking I'll take a whole different angle since you touched on that, because that's one continuum to discuss. Yeah, so what I've noticed is when I was young, I was just, I wasn't educated, and I just thought, wow, I have to get all my protein from meat, and boom, we just like, vegetarians are like, they couldn't possibly live. And then when I got to college and I started actually studying nutrition in college and was learning everything from, the standard nutrition science of macronutrients, metabolisms, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, um, I also got exposed to the alternative systems. And I was lucky to go to a college that had progressive professors. Plus, I'm just the personality type that loves to do research. So I did extracurricular activity, partly because I was suffering. I had health issues in high school that were so serious that it scared me a lot. So that's partly why I was studying nutrition in college as opposed to something else, right? And so I got really interested in, well, wow. So the amino acids is what our body uses, and vegetables and seeds and nuts and legumes and all these things are loaded with amino acids, and they can be cleaner protein than what I would call junk meat, right? So I'd been raised on junk meat and just factory meat and factory dairy. So part of the reason I wasn't doing as well as I could have been doing was, junk. Just like there's junk chocolate and there's artisan cacao, right? There's always a continuum of quality. So first I had to just learn, okay, wow, there's a whole different qualitative, spectrum to find my place on. Then there's also the quantitative, like, oh, wow, why is there so much argument about how much protein to eat? Like, and so-called like Yeah, and there is good science around why some people need it. We're all need more protein than others. We're all bio-individuated to some extent. From gender, males tend to need a little more protein than females, but then you can immediately throw out the exceptions. A female that is super active, has a job doing construction, or is an athlete doing intense kind of workout type things, need more protein. That's just the fact. So, in terms of quantity, I've gotten to the point now, I never worry about it. I'm just like kind of a little more in the, for lack of a better term, the middle path, like the Buddha would say in life, avoid the extremes. Like too much protein taxes our kidneys, creates too much, uric acid. Too little protein creates all kinds of problems. There's very small percentage of people in the developed worlds have to worry about too little protein, except for certain people trying to do maybe a radical veganism, maybe a raw food vegan diet. I've definitely seen, I experimented with that. I definitely was a raw food vegan for a while and saw, like how far can you go in that direction, and for how
So
long.
would you say that it's not, maybe for a lot of us, it's not so much that we focus on the quantity of protein, but maybe more so the quality of protein and the quality of our ability to assimilate that protein would be.
Yes, correct. Well, that's point number three. So perfect lead in.
Mm.
Yeah, let's talk quality. So, some of the factors for quality of protein is obviously just, how clean is it? Are there toxins embedded in the protein? So when I referred to junk meat, that's a big piece of what I was referring to.
Yeah, and when we
For
say
people,
toxins, we mean hormones, antibiotics, we can mean glyphosate on the plants, we can mean there's a whole variety of.
heavy metals, et cetera, et cetera. So, but that's also going to be, even within the plant-based diet spectrum, or organically grown, lentils and grains and nuts and seeds aren't going to have pesticides and herbicides embedded. Sure, the hormones aren't going to be an issue in the plant kingdom,
Mhm.
but the heavy metals and the pesticides and the herbicides can all concentrate into the plant. So in terms of quality, we're looking for clean, but we're also looking for, as you mentioned earlier, ease of digestion,
Mhm.
ease of assimilation, and ease of elimination. So there was a time when I liked this analogy. It's a little extreme, but just for fun. Like, so to get your proper amount of protein in a day, let's look at two kind of absurd opposite ends of the spectrum. One is you ate nothing but hamburgers for breakfast, lunch, and dinner to get your protein. So those tend to be a little heavier, harder to digest, harder to assimilate, and harder to detox and eliminate, right? So it's almost like if you have your car, you have a choice. You go to the gas station and you put gasoline in your pump because your car is optimized for gasoline. It's a more refined energy source. But let's just say that in the trunk of your car, you had a miniature oil refinery and you decided to put crude oil into the trunk, and all the energy that that little refinery would take to turn the crude oil into gasoline before you could even start the car and start driving. So eating hamburgers all day could be a little bit like, trying to put crude oil in a car. You've got to do a lot of processing, right? Whereas if you're going to eat a little lighter, diet, I'll just, take the other extreme of, like you're going to eat, you know, plant-based proteins all day. It's going to be way easier to assimilate and eliminate, right? So that's on the quality thing. So the other thing I'll say, because I don't want this to be like vilifying anybody who eats a high percentage of animal protein. I honor everybody's choice. I'm just here to be of service, and I want to leave aside any opinions and try to stick just to facts. And so when you brought up how you've traveled across the spectrum from higher percentage of animal protein to lower, I've experimented with that too, to see what is my body really thriving on, because
Mhm.
that's the main metric, is what is your bio-individuation calling for. And that isn't going to be a static thing forever. It's dynamic. You mentioned seasons, right? So that's
So
really key.
as we move into discovering what our bodies are really thriving on, type of
Mm-hmm.
protein aside, they finding, okay, this is how we assimilate and create vitality in our bodies. Now we're digesting a lot of protein. We need a lot of protein, like you said. It's the second most common and necessary molecule in our bodies. Amino acids are all over in plants and in animal proteins. Now when we're digesting these proteins, they're not by themselves, right? They come along with other chemicals, good, bad, and otherwise.
Yeah. Like, so what are you referring to there? Like, what's?
Like the entourage of things that come in with the
Oh,
protein. Have you
yeah,
found,
right.
as you have found your ideal on what type of protein you're consuming, what is good to have along with it for your body's best results?
Excellent points. So yeah, the entourage effect is one of the most underestimated factors, because we've been raised in a culture that is really enamored with reductionist science, which is great in the fields of physics, mechanical engineering, chemistry. If you're going to make paint, you need to be able to reduce polymers down to, those key chains, right? But for a complex biological system like the human body, we don't want isolated nutrients. Like, we don't just want, you know, uh, yeah, I can't even, like, just one amino acid isolated all by itself all the time. Although there is a place for that, and I'll address that a little later in this, because I've got a couple of tricks and tips and hacks and fun things, around protein and aminos that I think is worth doing. But back to entourage effect. So the first thing to say is that plant-based proteins automatically come with a bunch of macronutrients and micronutrients already embedded. So I'm just going to use one of my favorite examples, maybe lentils, right?
Mm-hmm.
But pick almonds being the highest protein containing nuts of the nut family, but lentils. So lentils have great micronutrients and macronutrients. So slow burn carbs, not refined carbs. Okay. A little bit of healthy fat, incredibly great dietary fiber in plant-based proteins in general, but especially, like some of the, um, legumes. And the reason I use lentils as an example is that, in terms of that quality spectrum that we're talking about, large legumes for some people are harder to digest than small. So pinto beans versus, say, lentils. For a lot of people, lentils are going to be an easier to digest, but all legumes are full of fiber, and fiber can be kind of underestimated in terms of the of all the macronutrients. It is there's almost nobody in America that is deficient in protein compared to the high percentage of Americans that are deficient in fiber. So that's like a huge upside. You're not thinking maybe to eat lentils primarily for the fiber, but the better we eliminate, let's just say it, nice, big, healthy, well-formed poops are a good sign that we're on track.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so that's just one aspect of the entourage. Whereas, animal-based proteins don't come with any of those good dietary fibers. They are a concentrated source of protein, but that's a big downside for animal proteins. And so that's one entourage effect. But however, if you're eating animal-based proteins and you're eating lots of other foods that are full of dietary fibers, you're covered. But you got to do it deliberately, right? Not unconsciously.
So when you were formulating something like Pacha protein, How does that entourage idea play into what you included beyond just the base proteins and including them?
Well, okay, so you're asking a question that gets really a little bigger because Pacha protein isn't just a protein source. Obviously, it's a meal replacement. So, as you know, there's 10 microgreens in there to give it's almost like a small salad side dish along with the proteins that are in there, right? But then we've also got, all those medicinal roots and turmeric and ashwagandha, and we've got, of course, the 5 medicinal mushrooms. So it's designed to be a full meal that includes the micronutrients and the macronutrients. So yeah, that that is a great example of the entourage effect, and it's all pretty much whole food ingredients that all have the entourage effect within each ingredient, plus the complementary synergistic value of all those ingredients together. So
Beautiful. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
That moves us into assimilation and the bioavailability of these types of formulations and the way we introduce protein into our bodies. How do we know we're assimilating it correctly? And what are some important parts of proper bioavailability and assimilation?
Okay, great question. So back to the basic science we talked about. Let's just not use the word protein for a second, and let's talk about, the bloodstream with all these nutrients. And right now we'll just focus on the amino acids. So we've got the amino acids that our bloodstream is loaded with amino acids from the food we're eating. And the cells are grabbing those amino acids in the ratios that they want. The skin cells are going to grab a slightly different ratio of amino acids than, say, the muscles are going to grab the aminos a little bit differently. So in general, cleaner proteins and in general plant proteins, the amino acid matrix is a little more spacious and open. And so the body can, the first stages of digestion occur in the stomach, right? Actually, some stages of digestion start in the mouth with the enzymes in the mouth, especially around starches and things.
We back that up even into when the brown rice protein is fermented and pulverized. Would that
Oh,
count as
right.
an area of
Oh,
digestion?
yes. Well, that's a whole other thing is yes, things that are somewhat pre-digested that are like fermented foods, sprouted foods, excellent point. That's why, say, mung bean sprouts have stood the test of time in Asia, is that they're just way easier to digest than cooked mung beans. That's just kind of a fact. But fermented foods like protein powder, like brown rice, all by itself is only 7% protein by weight, but sprouted brings the rice percentage protein up, and then fermented and processed to take some of the starches out of the brown rice. Brown rice protein is 80%. So it takes rice from, unfermented and unsprouted rice from 7% to this protein powder that's clean and easy to digest and is 80% pure protein, which is one of the reasons why it's, typically the largest protein powder that we'll include in products. So those amino acids are really available. They're spacious. And so the digestive tract can just deliver those amino acids into the bloodstream quickly, easily, with less effort, right? So it's not like the oil refinery in the trunk. Our body works pretty hard to digest a hamburger from the stomach to the small intestine to the large intestine to the liver and the kidneys. It's just a fact, right? I don't mean to sound too, fanatical or hardcore, but it is physiology and anatomy, 101. So these amino acids that are like easy for the body to just like absorb, assimilate, spread around throughout the cellular tissues, and have very little downside for the cleanup process, the detox and the elimination. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Well, so as we
what's
move
the
into understanding that we take something like brown rice and we sprout it and ferment it, and that transitions it from 7% protein down to 80% protein. And then we build these formulas that include greens and adaptogens and probiotics, and we introduce them into the body in an easily assimilable way. It's just going to take less metabolic energy for us to get into a thriving state. So how do we
yes.
know when things aren't assimilating? What
Oh,
is
yeah, good point. Okay, so, well, the first part is the upper digestive tract is going to be, burping, belching, heavy feeling, maybe acid indigestion. There's different people have different symptoms. That symptoms is a word that really means messages, information. The body is constantly giving us information, and you're always good at reminding me of how the body is talking to us moment by moment throughout the day, right? So that's up in the upper digestive tract. And then as that meal is kind of digesting, and we might notice, ooh, I've got some bloating in the small intestine that's kind of like not feeling so good. I'm feeling a little off, especially as we get more and more in tune with our bodies, and we're not, so busy or so distracted all the time that we're ignoring these messages that come to us. And then in the lower intestine, the large intestine, where we're also going to have the same kind of maybe gassiness. It could be constipation. It could be overly loose bowels. We want a balance, an equilibrium there. So those are the signs in the digestive tract. And then, of course, everything happening in the digestive tract is just filtering through to every other cell in our body. So for some people, when we're eating foods that we're not really digesting well and don't agree with us well, we might get an eye twitch or a skin like irritate, like we might be finding ourselves itchy or irritable or just tired, like after meal snooze fest.
Because in
What
general,
about you?
when we consume, our proteins in particular, or our meals in general, we want to feel uplifted by that. We don't want our meals to move into, oh, I just ate some food and I'm tired. That's actually not a normal thing.
Yeah,
It should be digesting and assimilating the food in a way that's bringing energy and life force
yeah,
pretty immediately. And if that's
yeah,
off, that could mean something with the protein balance was also imbalanced.
yeah. Great point. Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
So you have a point about cost, and there's
Oh,
a variety of costs involved with proteins.
yeah. Yeah. Number six. So obviously, financial cost is the way we usually think of the word cost. And that's fine. We know that because there's a whole, continuum of wide spectrum of financial costs. For instance, I'll just use the lentils example again. Lentils are a fairly low cost protein source from a financial cost, but they also happen to be fairly low in terms of environmental cost, in terms of the impact on land. So as much as I love almonds being the highest protein containing of the nut family, um, they have a little higher environmental cost, as many people know, especially in drought areas of California where the almond farmers are ripping out almonds because they don't have enough water, or the water's gotten too expensive, and the electricity to pump, is coming from fossil fuels. So that's an example. But then you look at the animal products, animal proteins, and we know how much water and feed animal proteins can be, unless it's truly 100% pasture raised, grazed out in the grasslands. Then plant proteins are going to be way more efficient resource use than. And there's tons of research. We don't need to rehash that here. People know. Then there's the kind of more subtle and amorphous emotional and spiritual cost to different protein. Like, how do you feel? Like it, are you feeling guilty if you eat meats or almonds? I know somebody who feels guilty if they eat almonds because they know the environmental cost, and then that creates an emotional, spiritual cost. So, and that's a very personal thing. So, do you have any other things to add to the cost factor?
Well, I would add energy, and mood. There's a cost or an investment happening on when you are digesting, and if your energy is tanking or your mood is tanking, that's a cost.
That's a huge. That's an yeah, right.
I would also add that in general, these monocropping or mono animal situations where we break down a biosphere into this is for cattle or this is for almonds,
Mm-hmm,
and we break down the biodiversity of these spaces,
mm-hmm.
it tends to take a bigger toll on the environment around it. And also the quality of the food can diminish, and which takes a toll on us too. So there's hidden costs all over, from the emotional and spiritual all the way down to the dirt and the poop. So I think it's just wise to kind of drop into what seems to be building biodiversity
Yeah,
and in us and around us, and let that be one of the cost factors to consider gently when you're
yeah,
eating. Because bottom line, when you eat something, no matter what it is, be happy and grateful because you put it in
yeah,
your body, and
yeah.
there's no point in adding cost to cost with guilt. And
Well said. Yeah, thanks so much for making that point. That's so beautiful. Yeah, I used to feel really guilty way back in my 20s. I would secretly eat a whole pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream by myself,
yeah.
hopefully, and just would be like kind of like racked with guilt, binging on a pint of ice cream. So,
Well, enjoying our food, and there's so much around it because it's such an experience. It's so intimate. We're taking something into our bodies. So there's these
right.
layers of enjoyment and the taste, the pleasure, the way you make it, who you're sharing it with. Like maybe we
Yeah.
can talk about some of that.
Well, yeah, that definitely aids digestion. There's actually pretty good science around, I mean, you and I've talked in some of the other, topics that when we really look at the big picture of human health and anatomy and physiology, the one thing that is typically the most underestimated in our culture and in many cultures is the state of our autonomic nervous system, because it's like the fundamental base layer. It's kind of like, yeah, can't even come up with the best analogy, but it's like just so fundamental. It affects everything from our digestion to our mood to even the microorganisms in our gut. The happier we are, the more good bacteria is able to grow. And science doesn't quite understand the mechanism for that. It's able to measure the results. Science is really good at measuring the results of, the tone of the autonomic nervous system when it comes to the the electrical measurable waves in the nerves, and also measuring effect on blood chemistry, because some blood chemistry changes really fast, right? One example, we get into a super stressful situation, maybe a danger situation, and all of a sudden the cortisol levels in our bloodstream spike fast. Like hormones that get dumped out of our endocrine system into our bloodstream is really rapid. Like we're talking seconds that it's measurable, right? So that's just a split second behind the measurable, electrical impulses in our nerves. So guilt-free, happy, grateful feelings around eating and food, and frankly, even buying food.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just happy and grateful. And just one of the things Bronwyn and I do at the beginning of every meal, when we sit down to eat, is we thank all the beings that had anything to do with it, and to keep it kind of fun and playful and not like heavy spiritual, like,
Yeah, we don't need
pretentious.
each meal to be a funeral.
No, but we kind of get playful. And one of the things we'll say is, you know, Thank you to all the beings that had anything to do with this meal, from the microorganisms in the soil to the truck drivers who drove the trucks that moved this food. So we like to get playful and like visualize the enormous amount of people and other elements, from the rain to the, as you put it, down to the dirt.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good point because we can sit in the details of our diet in a very Western scientific way. It's like and number things, measure things in data, and am I getting enough protein? Is it the right type of protein? These are important questions, but they're also equally as important as understanding: am I happy? Am I digesting
Ah,
this properly because
yeah,
I'm feel safe in my life? Like all of these other layers.
yeah,
So we can look at protein, which is very important, but there's so much more going on.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
speaking of more than things that are going on, when we move into an entirely plant-based diet, maybe a raw food vegan direction, what are some of the things that can go wrong?
Oh yeah, so great. Yeah, this is one of our last points to cover, and that is that veganism has some really strong points. If it's done really well, right, can generate kind of a lighter, better energy for some people. It can be more conducive to a yoga and meditation lifestyle or whatever. However, the science and yeah, just first I'll say to the science of it is that there were no vegan cultures anywhere on the planet when the nutritional anthropologists studied, all the indigenous cultures. Um, as they were starting to really get impacted, they began this research back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, and trying to catalog what all these indigenous cultures ate before they got too affected by modern diet, so to speak. And they only found one vegan culture and that was in Africa, little isolated tribe. And they weren't very healthy at all. And as soon as the local lake, once a year for a couple of weeks, would bloom with a micro shrimp, they would gorge on those. But their teeth, their hair, their nails, their skeletal structure, their infant mortality, their height, etc., there were definitely inferior human anatomy and physiology based on that. So, however, that was in an isolated pocket, but it shows us that the human body, can have difficulties with a vegan diet. However, we have the benefit today of a food chain where you can be a super healthy vegan if you do it right, if you eat, good quality proteins and you're not leaning towards too many carbs and too many sweets. Like the refined carbs is kind of the biggest bane of a lot of vegans. Um, and you're getting plenty of high grade proteins in general. But specifically, there's three supplements that I would suggest every person who's eating a super high percentage plant based diet, and especially people who are doing 100% plant based, and that is L-lysine. That amino acid L-lysine tends to be deficient in a 100% plant based diet. And you don't have to go off and eat meat once in a while to get it. It's a very inexpensive supplement. Um, and we take it a lot. And it also happens to be helpful for the immune system. So you're likely to get less, colds and flus. And for people who get fever blisters, have the herpes complex, in their system, L-lysine supplementation is recommended for them. And also, if you eat a lot of cacao, which is very low in lysine and very high in arginine, taking L-lysine happens to be a really synergistic thing with cacao. So L-lysine, and then B12 and vitamin D. And I think everybody knows about why B12 and vitamin D are important if you're eating a super high percentage plant-based diet. But and they're all three really inexpensive supplements. So
And
really,
I would also add to that really healthy fats, because with the
oh
hardcore
yeah,
vegan, you can get into a blood sugar roller coaster with the
Oh,
insulin blood
yes.
sugar spikes. So making sure you're getting really healthy fats to help slow down the metabolism and boost the ketones in the blood and things like that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And biodiversity, like it's really important to have variety. So getting those fats, for sure, avocado oil, olive oil, and coconut oil, big time on those, and a few of the other oils that are like in a jar, but especially like lots of foods in the plant-based diet that have embedded fats. So flax seeds, chia seeds are huge for that. Chia's like absolutely, up there in the superfoods. Flax too, but flax's flavor profile is a little harder to incorporate into certain things, whether that's smoothies or muffins or whatever you're doing. So chia seeds is a big one. But yeah, thanks for bringing up the fats
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
avocados, coconut, all the foods that are um, have those fats already in them,
Hmm.
and nuts, pecans, walnuts, cashews. Um, yeah,
And it's important with those, though, also to just tune your system up to paying attention to if they're rancid or not. Maybe you can dive into your personal tips and tricks and how you like to eat protein.
Great. Yeah. So, yeah, kind of in the context of just giving people a, encouragement to lean into, fairly high percentage, whatever is the perfect percentage for their body for plant-based proteins. For all the reasons we've talked about, there are some key advantages, but never to like get dogmatic here and try to, turn a vegan diet into a religion or something. So not into that. So in that context, though, most people know about things like quinoa and legumes. Like so, I've talked up lentils. I've just happened to love those as like a staple of all of the beans and legumes. We like lentils the best. They're so easy to incorporate into all kinds of things, and a lot of people are pretty up on quinoa, way higher percentage of protein than rice. Why is that? Because rice is a grain, and we love rice too. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not like some anti-rice person, but in general, we lean towards the seeds. So quinoa, definitely. Buckwheat. Buckwheat is definitely an up and coming super seed that people could, utilize a lot more of. you know, and making buckwheat flour, like we just use our little coffee grinder and we'll grind up buckwheat flour if we want to make, like yesterday, I made the most amazing, super high protein, healthy ginger cookies with like, fresh, chopped ginger
Sure.
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've even got that ginger superfood element mixed with, but yeah, I ground up in the coffee grinder chia seeds and buckwheat seeds. And then I found this new kind of oats that's, maybe there's other places to get it, but it was Bob's Red Mill has these oats that are 50% higher protein than normal oats, and they taste great. They're just like regular oats, and it's not like they're spraying protein powder on them or something, it's not that. So obviously, with plants, plant science people can hybrid, but it is organic, it's not like it's some like frankenfood.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's just a fun little thing. Yeah, buckwheat, I've mentioned chia, flax is really great. Again, what we're talking about is um, these these proteins and the healthy fats that you brought up combined with all these other micronutrients like fiber, because we know chia and flax and nuts and seeds and legumes are all really, really great, dietary fiber already tagging along like this, like it's almost like you're getting, a 2 for 1. You're getting a freebie, it's pretty great. But lastly, of course, I've got to promote our stuff because uh, I just, part of the reason we designed these and began to develop them, for me, I was developing for myself 15 years ago for the reasons you mentioned. I wanted, you know, things that digested quickly, easily. Prep time was easy. Let's face it, we're all busy. Nobody wants to spend 2 hours making a meal if, except for when that's fun and that's appropriate when you've got the time. Maybe that's whatever on a weekend, but, for most of us. So time efficiency, in addition to nutritional efficiency, in addition to environmental efficiency, all kind of get me lit up and excited. And just good vibration foods. Like, over time, it's like, I like the higher vibration for me that I'm a vibrational match with, as opposed to foods that I'm not. So rancid oils, like someone hands me a bag of, corn chips, or even like new agey chips, chia buckwheat chips. I immediately put my face in the bag and smell it. And if the oils smell even slightly rancid, I'm like, I'll have one
Yeah.
chip to be polite, but you know.
Do you have any philosophy around leftovers?
Um, I love leftovers because I'm kind of like, I'm busy. So we purposely, but we like to upgrade them. So I know that in Ayurveda, there can be an overly, in my opinion, overly dogmatic anti-leftovers, only make a small amount and eat it all in. I don't subscribe to that myself,
Mhm.
although I honor people that make time to make it fresh from scratch every day. But what we like to do is so if we make dal, we might put half of it in the freezer, and then skip a couple days just for the biodiversity and the fun of our diet, the enjoyment that we just talked about. And then we'll pull it out a couple days later. And then we'll thaw that dal out. We'll put it in the pan, but we'll add some extra ingredients. Maybe it's a fresh vegetable. Maybe we'll add, some sesame tahini to kind of give it an additional sesame Asian like dal flavor. So we like to kind of maybe spiff it up. What about you?
Oh man, tips and tricks for my style of protein. I definitely I don't eat leftovers much at all anymore. I used to live on leftovers. I'd make a meal on Sunday or Monday and I'd eat it that week. But I found that I don't know, maybe it's a histamine sensitivity, whatever the detail is. I just found that I enjoy making it fresh daily. But I only have one meal a day, so it's a lot less to make when I'm not making 3 meals a day. And so
Oh yeah.
I make my meal each day from scratch and tend to finish it. Um yeah. So I think as we move into the outro of this video, I don't have anything else on my list necessarily, other than maybe a summary. Is there any other things that you want to touch on?
Well, I was just going to see if you wanted to give people like any hint of how you like to use Sarva, proteins or meal replacements, because I I could at least say that I find myself liking to bounce back and forth between Pacha protein, sacred strength, those two that are, the meal
Mm.
replacements, as like kind of a core position. But I'm wildly in love with Cacao Plus and Sita protein. So to keep it fun, interesting, and biodiverse, I combine one or two of those, sometimes even three. And just for kicks, not that it really matters, but you know how I like to make a frothy, yummy, kind of bulletproof Sarva, conscious coffee, conscious cacao, those two products together. But I set a little bit of it aside today and added Sita protein before we did our recording. So I'd have a little more protein in my
Yep.
morning frothy, like bulletproof Moksha Mocha, I call it.
Mhm.
And so, because we're talking protein, so I thought, all right, I'm going to get in the swing of it. I'm putting
Yep.
Sita
Yep.
protein in because all those great Ayurvedic spices was so compatible with the cacao and those other coffee substitutes. So I love having these easy tools, like like the the canvas of the blender, so to speak, and the
Mhm.
palette of
Mhm.
colors is different Sarva products that are quick and easy. And I know I'm just getting micronutrients, macronutrients. So I'm doing a big sales plug, but there's other products like ours. Like, if people like other powders, great. As long
Yeah.
as they're clean and high vibe, and, made
As long
from,
as you're feeling great,
yeah,
actually feeling great.
yeah. So I just wanted to like say, like, have fun with it, and use these tools and give us input,
Yeah.
like let us know what's working for you and what's not.
Hmm. Hmm. Beautiful. So there you go, folks. There's one journey through protein land. And by proteins we mean amino acids, and making sure we're getting the right building blocks for essentially every function in our body, and making
Yeah.
sure that they come along with the things that are going to help our whole system work, where we're detoxing well, where we're building a wide variety of microorganisms that are healthy for us, and also having good health and happiness habits to go along with it, and that we're sharing our food with people that we care about and in gratitude, and no matter what we're eating, that we welcome it to our bodies, because there it is, and it's what
Yeah.
we're made of.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well said. Thanks for that summary. Yeah, make it fun, make it beautiful, and share with others, and be vibrant and healthy so you can show up for all the important ways in your life, but also to show up for others. We all need to be in service to each other, right? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
thanks. Thanks for letting us be in service to you and supporting us here at Sarvaa. Really appreciate you all.
Thanks for listening.